What's going on, everybody? My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and it is my pleasure to welcome you back to Silmarillion Total War. Today I've got a 2 versus 2. This is being played on our test build. It is the latest version, so everything that you are seeing is currently up to date as it stands right this very moment. Without any further ado, let's take a look at some of the army comps here, and then we can jump into the battle itself. The first army we're going to look at today is the House of Halath. In fact, we have a 2 times Halath team here, which isn't something you see very often. Usually people try to diversify a little bit more. But Paladins are one of those factions that you can, sometimes get away with doubling up on. The army of Tundra's Fox consists of Huskarlar. Looks like he's got, I'd say, between 3 and 4 regiments of the Huskarlar, which means he's definitely gone into the red for them, or maybe that's a change we made recently. I don't know. There's been too many. A couple of dismounted Wall-Trider Dragoons here. Those are detachments. A little bit of extra skirmish power for the otherwise very skirmish-shy Haladin faction. Over here we have some of the Ulfadin of Ethel Barandir. I think since the live version they have changed a little bit. They've dropped down from 120 models to 100. They've also lost their fear effect. The reason we did that is that it was found they were kind of double dipping. So you get the combat penalties off the big charge where the other unit is losing in combat, and that accrues with fear and the additional casualties accrued from the charge, and it basically just made them able to rout mostly anything off that they wanted to. So that's been changed a little bit. They are now 100, individually more potent than they were at 120, but there are, of course, less of them overall, which has the added consequence of making them not an essential part of every single Haladin composition, so that's always fun. Swear to Brother here, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 Swear to Brother. Definitely got some Rigswear in the field today, a nice little chaff unit. This is one of the few, well, I say few, but there's a couple of Lock Morale units in the Haladin faction, and this is one of them. Like all Haladin sword units, they are also relentless, so that applies to the Swear to Brother here as well. But unlike most Haladin sword units, the Rigswear are, as I mentioned, Locked Morale. So they make an excellent little tar pit, difficult to get rid of. They do have some precursor javelins, which means not armor piercing or anything nasty like that, but it is some extra punch before they rush into melee. So always welcome to see them on the field. They are, of course, lightly armored and unshielded, so you want to be careful about when you choose to reveal them. Over here, we have some of the Mardrot, these beautiful colored warriors here. They are spear cavalry / harassment javelins, and for the uninitiated, harassment javelins are long-range, high ammunition, low base damage, armor-piercing missiles, best used for, you guessed it, harassment. There are other various kinds of javelins in the mod. We will talk about them a little bit if we encounter them in this battle. As I mentioned, the Mardrot are also spear cavalry. They've got a good enough charge that you're not going to mind, throwing them into the rear, especially the rear or the flank of just about anything, and they will do a significant amount of damage. That being said, it is not an armor-piercing charge, so they will not be able to cut through heavy infantry who are able to turn around and face them, as well as anything with a decent defense value. Over here we have some Skaldmare of Halath. You can see a beautiful new general's model here, and that was loaned to us by the Conflicts of Eriador? Yes, COE team. The Skaldmare are best used for hunting down monsters, but they have the added bonus, along with all the other axe throwers in the game, of having a little bit of extra ammunition and base damage as well. So they're now a little bit more dangerous overall. Not just to monsters, those axes will of course hurt anybody that you throw them at, because it is a big the axe coming straight for your forehead. A couple of Rigswear over here as well. So there's going to be at least 2 or 3 units on the field today. A second unit of the Mardrot, and I think we might have some other cavalry hiding around here, question mark, maybe not. Popping on over to the other side, we have another House of Halath army being played by Alexander 10Q. We've got Rigswear, we've got some Wall-Trider Dragoons, 2 units of, and they are melee cavalry with a bow. It doesn't last for very long. I think it's only like 5 or 6 shots or something like that before you can comfortably throw them into melee, where they will do very well for themselves. They are, of course, axe armed, which for the Haladin means that they hit like absolute trains, and that translates into their charge bonus as well. So if you can get some rear or flank opportunistic charges with these Wall-Trider Dragoons, it will notice. You will definitely notice. Your opponent is going to feel it. We've got some Mardrot of Malduin over here as well, 2 units of, so a decent cavalry force for the Haladin. One of the things to note about the lovely Haladin is that their entire, aside from their bodyguards, we're going to talk about them a little bit here, But otherwise, their entire infantry force is technically mid-tier, so they enjoy mid-tier bonuses and things like that. Whereas all of the high-tier units are going to be units like the Welsh-Rider Dragoons or the Mardrot of Malduin. Over here, we've got some Darwarda of Ethelbrandir. This is a bodyguard tier unit. They do not have their armor upgrade from the looks of things. Their javelins are actually armor-piercing. They're sort of a halfway in between a Hunter Javelin, which is the higher damage, lower range, and lower ammunition pool version of the javelins that exist within our mod. So, just to recap for you, we have Precursor, which is nothing special, a little bit of extra damage, Harassment, long range, low damage, high ammunition, and then Hunter Javelins, which are lower range, slower in-flight speed, and way more damage at the cost of a lot of ammunition. So, Darwarda, also axe-armed, very nasty in close quarters. I've seen builds that incorporate 2, sometimes even 3 of them, and they can do very, very well. A ton of chaff grinding potential, but of course, being a 1 HP bodyguard unit, when they run into some really stiff resistance and things start to go against them, especially when they're outnumbered, which the Haladin very frequently are, things can turn around quite quickly. So, want to support them, and they can do very well. Sweater Brother of Thargelion over here as well. Got some Warda of Brethil. Armor-piercing spears, able to hide just about anywhere. These Arboreal Vikings, not as inconspicuous as their traits would suggest with those brightly colored shields, but you can use them as a screen. You can use them to hold the line. You can use them in a variety of different ways, and you're going to see some of that when we move on to our Bronze League tournament coverage. There's a great example of Warda of Brethil being used to extremely devastating effect against a superior foe. A couple of dismounted Welsh Rider here as well. The second company of the Darwarda. Got some Sweater Brother here of Thargelion. And I think that's more or less going to round it off here for the Haladin. So let's pop across the field and see what their opponents are bringing to the battle today. Across the field, we have a very, very wide formation, probably extremely mid-tier heavy, as I know how the player likes to play. We have the Grey Elves of Mithrim being played by Mevin, and I'm sure he's got some hidden units in the forest here, so we'll definitely pick those out as we see them, but a brief overview of what's visible in his army. We have a ton of Sword Bearers of Mithrim here. The things to note about Mithrim and about this unit in particular is that many Mithrim units have extremely high shield values, and that comes, of course, at the cost of melee defense, as I have added some penalties to really high shield value units so that they cannot mix high shield and high melee defense value in order to become basically unkillable gods. One other thing to note about the Sword Bearers of Mithrim is that they have a much higher than average charge value, probably about a 200%, 250 or so percent bonus. So they've got a base value of 7. You can bump that to 10 with an attack upgrade, and then they get that extra little bit of oomph afterwards. So very, very strong potentially. Really nice mid-tier unit with a decent amount of survivability. A little bit lower on the armor side of things. So here we have a catapult crewed by some of the Hewing Guildsmen, armed with the signature Matic, which is a brand new weapon type that is available only to the Elves of Mithrim. It will increase their speed, give them armor piercing, give them some very solid damage, but all of that is going to come at the cost, of course, of some melee defense. That's one of the things that Mithrim is not amazing with. One other thing to note about those Guildsmen is that these full units, as you can see them over here, looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, they can actually upgrade their armor. In fact, I believe they're the only Mithrim unit that's able to do so, so they can go from 7 to 9, but it does come at the cost, as many other units of their type. This will hold true for them as well. If a unit can upgrade from medium to heavy, they will not be able to hide in the forests any longer. So the Hewing Guildsman Androth trade off that survivability for stealth, or stealth for survivability, the other way around, but it ends up working out ultimately. Outlaws of Hithlum here. These are 2-handed spearmen, making them excellent monster hunters, good support for cavalry and things like that, or supporting other units against cavalry. It can really go either way. They've also got a clutch of throwing axes, which got a little bit of a buff in the new patch, a little bit of extra damage, and some extra range there as well. Outlaws of Hithlum, potentially a very, very useful unit for its utility. Up here, we've got some more Sword Bearers. I'm almost positive he's got some of the Bane of the Incomers, or Bane of the Eastcomers, or something. It's a special archer unit that basically operates as a mangonel arrow. You need to be able to judge the distance of your shots very well, but each individual shot will break into tiny little shards, which will deal damage in an area. It's a little bit different from the split shot, in that it doesn't split immediately. You do need to be able to kind of judge the distance with this, so there is something of a skill cap and a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to taking advantage of that new projectile type. There's definitely more. He's got some cavalry in here, I believe some of the Shore Riders, which are a melee cavalry harassment javelin hybrid, sort of similar to the Feanor Mounted Company of Kudufin, but they're a little bit lighter and naturally being Mithrim, a little bit lower on defense. Over here, I'm certain we've got some archers in the field. This is probably going to be one of the Abaran archers. I think they're the Moss Stalkers of Taurin Duinath, something like that. And they're going to be played today by Captain Gervais. He's also got a ton of Thorncasters here. These are really nice harassment javelin unit. In fact, I would say they're probably the best harassment javelin unit in the game. Like many of the tree units for the Avari of Taurim Duinath, they have a lot of armor, okay-ish middling melee defense, but many of those units will also have the Bark Skin special rule, which is going to give them a passive shield value, which is going to help them against missiles from the front, but it's also going to raise their survivability overall. In addition to, they've got really nasty missile damage. I think it's 3 as opposed to the normal 2 of harassment javelins, and you can bring them in pretty sizable numbers. They use, I think, a high-tier infantry template, so they're not terrible in close quarters. Really a nice little all-around unit, and one of the things that the Avari of Taurin Duinath specialize very heavily in is close quarters damage. They're a glass cannon faction, but this doesn't follow that special rule. Great for saturating an area with fairly long-range projectiles. Second unit here of the Moss Stalkers of the Darkling Woods. And they're going to have poison arrows. They also have some decent little shields and armor-piercing clubs in melee. In behind them, we have some of the Shades of the Guarded Path. This is the bodyguard unit for the Avari. I believe it's the only bodyguard unit currently. They are 1 HP units. And essentially, they are the sworn blood brothers of an Avari chieftain. Whenever the chieftain passes away or is killed in battle, as it would have to be for elves since they're immortal, the Shades will commit ritual suicide and they will go with him. That is why they are called the Shades, not only because they are constantly shadowing their lord, but they are essentially dead men walking. In the back here, we have some Bow Wards of the Darkling Woods. They are light spearmen, extremely fast, and a lot of light spearmen have been given an extra point of damage against all mount types that are considered to be horses. And that's going to help them out a little bit versus cavalry, as that's one of the things that the Avari quite conspicuously lack, is the presence of any sort of mounted unit in their roster. Over here we have some Shades of the Guarded Path. I'm almost positive that we've got between 2 and 3 units of Rangers of the Hidden Path. The Avari culture is sort of divided into different paths and specializations, somewhat akin, I would say, to like the Eldar warrior or aspect classes. Things like that. The Rangers are they are Hunter Javelins. They're also poison, so they'll do a little bit of morale damage. I believe it's -2 for about 7 seconds. So they can be used in a multitude of roles. Very scary, potentially. And then in the center here, we've got Stonehewers. We've got some more Bow Wards, with the Stonehewers in particular. Extremely nice. Very high charge values being axes, but it's a little bit higher than normal. They've also got a nasty bite in close quarters. But they are, of course, light infantry, so they don't have a ton of defense, and axes do lower their melee defense just that much more. That being said, Stonehewers aren't super expensive. You can bring a good amount of them, and a attack upgrade will give them an extra 3 points of damage. So they can be fabulous at trading against high-tier infantry or grinding up chaff, depending on what your needs are. So 2 to 3 units there at least, and then some more Bow Wards out on the wing. Not sure what else he's kind of got hidden here. This seems a little bit small for an Avari army, but of course we're going to find that out as we move through the battle. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Up here on the hill, the challenge of the Mithrim Elves has hitherto gone unanswered. That being said, they don't realize it, but there are definitely some Halath forces prowling nearby in the long grass. The Avari is still a little bit stationary, probably sizing up their opponents. This early in the battle, people usually like to take their time and then begin to slowly move in and probe. One of the things that I've noticed for the red team so far is that there is a very big lack of cavalry. And while cavalry is noticeably weaker in Silmarillion than in a lot of other mods, there's a lot less HP, a lot less armor and things like that. They're much more susceptible to missile fire. They do add a lot of mobility and therefore utility that can swing a losing fight into your favor and ultimately allow you to come out on top. So that's a big advantage in the corner for the purple team. We'll see if they're able to capitalize on it. Dismounted Weltrider Dragoons here taking point. Probably don't want to get too close to the Thorncasters of Talent and Dweenath. There's not really enough of them in force here, and the Haladin are really never going to have a super strong skirmishing force. It's something that runs out of steam very, very quickly for them. They're much more of a close quarters ambush specialized faction. So it's interesting to see what Hunter's Fox intends to accomplish here, bringing these Weltrider Dragoons to the forefront. Up here on the hill, things are pretty quiet so far, and it looks like Mithrim is starting to bring a lot of their units forward. So we should get a chance to glimpse some of the surprises, potentially, that Mevin has in store for them. Got some sword bearers here, 1, 2, 3, 4 units. Could just be used as a heavy flanking force. Looks like we've got some more units over here. And indeed, we do have some short riders of Mithrim. At least 2 units here of these harassment javelins. They, of course, have their massive kite shields, which is a useful thing to have. Keeps them alive in close quarters. They are also axe armed, so they can hit pretty hard off the charge. And I wonder if we're going to see the legendary company for the Mithrim Elves on the field today. The Batterets of the Hidden Shore can be so devastating, and probably the finest medium lancer in the game for sure. But so far, no sign of them. These Mardrod of Malduin here taking point, very well hidden, and in a really good spot here to potentially stop any reinforcements from coming up to the hill, driving a wedge between the Mithrim Elves and the rest of their army. And the only thing that seems to be there to push through is a few units of the sword bearers, and they could be held down for a very long time by all of these Warda here, while the rest of the Haladin force is used and brought to bear against the forces stranded up here on this hill here. Guildsmen, more sword bearers. I would expect the catapult to start to move upwards here towards the top of that hill, so they can really start giving it to the Haladin factions. That being said, they haven't really moved out of their starting positions yet. He's probably going to want to wait for them to blob up a little bit before he plays that card. Oh no, the Weltrider Dragoons here just getting picked on a little bit. I think maybe the Thorncasters were able to get a piece of them. Of course, the Mosstalkers here of the Darkling Woods are able to trade relatively efficiently with them. That's a fight that they're going to win overall, but you know, like the dismounted Weltrider Dragoons are not super expensive. They are shielded, so they can take that for a while. And they just end up being a bit of an ammo sponge and kind of a nuisance that you can't really afford to ignore because of the damage that they can potentially do to some of the lighter units in the Avari roster. I'm going to go ahead here and crank things up to 1.6 speed, try and keep it nice and brisk. Over here, it looks like the Weltrider Dragoons are trading blows with the Mosstalkers, managing to get a few kills here. And the Haladin under Tundra's Fox have suddenly sprung into action. Huskarlar of Thargelion taking point. Very nasty damage here that can come from these units. They have got throwing axes. Ooh, but they're starting to take it on the chin from those Thorncasters as the rest of the axemen for the Avari move forward. Now would be a really good time for Captain Gervais to get in there and deny them that initial volley. But those Franciscas are going to fly, and those poor bow wards, I imagine, that's going to, cut down quite a number of them. You can really see the improvements there to throwing axes with only just that one extra point of damage. Stonehewers charging into battle here against the Swear-to Brother, getting a nice charge off. Bow wards, despite the damage, are actually managing to hold their own. Thorned Ancients of Towering Dweenath coming out of nowhere, not super damaging, but extremely tanky. And in tandem with the bow wards and now the shades, that's more than enough there to overrun that Haladin front line potentially. Ulfadin being brought in to counter, of course. These heavily armored barky beasts are going to feel their bite for sure. They're armor piercing. They're going to be able to cut through Thorned Ancients armor and shred their HP extremely quickly. Not something that the Haladin want to let sit in there for very long. Rigswear managing to, I would assume, disgorge some of their javelins. The Thorned Ancients are going to charge in there. They're going to do just fine against the Rigswear, whose defenses are not formidable at all. Tundra's Fox not having the greatest time here as the Avari are able to just deal an extreme amount of damage. Huskarlar being shredded in just mere moments. You can really see just how devastating Thorncasters can be. This is exactly what they are good at, and against lighter units like this, whose shield and armor is cut in half by the AP and the higher base damage of the Thorncasters, this is just not going to go well for the Haladin. Gotta love the impetus of that charge, and it's really, you can see the damage being done here to this front line. Swear to Brother holding their own. Over here, the Avari are definitively being beaten back, and the Huskarlar are able to kind of do their bloody work. But in most places on the line right now, the Avari are managing to cut their way through the Haladin. That being said, Haladin ain't no joke, super sticky, and they have a lot of really nice damaging options and utility built in to their weapon types. That is looking like Rex's allies bombarding the poor Haladin, and see if they manage to strike home, and it, oh, so close. This one here might hit somebody. Nope, all three of those missed. Tundra's Fox is going to see it, and he's going to hightail it out of there as quickly as he possibly can. Skaldmare, ooh. Yeah, Skaldmare coming under fire here. They will take a little bit of attrition, but not very much from the front. They have decent enough armor. They're sort of the legendary company variant of the Ulfadin, in that they have better armor, but they don't do as much damage, and then, of course, they don't have Relentless, but they do have a shield, so that's always helpful. But yeah, the ladies there will be able to hold on for quite a while. Over here, Alexander's army is fighting a literal uphill battle here against the human guildsmen, but the numbers here for the Haladin are certainly paying off. Sword Bearers taking it on the chin here from Darwarda, and this is exactly what they are meant to do. They will shred chaff like nobody's business. They will cut through bone like butter, and the Sword Bearers in this loose formation are not going to be able to hold them back as the bodyguard begin to push their way through. That being said, Bane of the Incomers here. Let's see if we can get a look at this terrifying arrow of theirs. Unfortunately, not too many good shots there. I think Mevin might need to reposition. It's a great spot here for him to just rain down death and destruction, and a beautiful enfilade probably right into the center of that Avari army. Now things are starting to turn around for the Haladin. Some of the Huskarlar managed to use their entire ammunition pool. Now they have charged in to the center, and they're slowly beginning to overwhelm the Avari, who have lost the initiative here. Meanwhile, in this particular area, the Avari are still very much ascendant, and I think some of the Ulfin have managed to track down the Thorned Ancients, and now they're having a very bad time indeed. While those Mothstalkers rain down death and destruction upon the Ulfin, they will be able to even this fight out a little bit, but it's only a matter of time. The Thorned Ancients are, their days are certainly numbered. Now, those Bane of the Incomers letting loose their arrows, and you can see that begin to split there, and the damage that this could potentially do, especially firing into the rear of the Sweater Brother. They don't like it. And this whole area is just being peppered. Meanwhile, we're going to switch on over here. It looks like Mevin has been holding back some of his forces, and I think Alexander has been bleeding over support to try and help out his ally, and also take on the Mithram Elves on the top of that hill there, try and wrest that position from them. So he's got tons of Warda here, lots of cavalry. So I think once Mevin starts to come forward, this could turn out very badly. Although it's worth noting, still got a couple units here of Pocket Shore Riders of Mithram. They could be potentially the swing factor here. If they manage to get into the Mardrot of Malduin, despite the fact that they are mid-tier, the Mardrot don't have super high damage. They are spear units, so they do have a lot of things against them in terms of built-in penalties. So I think that those mid-tier Axemen would certainly be able to hack their way through even these high-tier Mardrot, though doubtless they will put up a pretty decent fight, and with a little bit of help from Warder of Breathville, that could be a different story, but we'll see what happens. Over here, Alexander, his forces committed to the hill, not having a great time. The Darwarda here have been pushed back from where we saw them just a moment ago. However, they're managing to break through and get up the hill, but now they've been slaughtered all the way back down here, and help is needed. A second unit of Darwarda is here to lend a hand. And they're going to be picking on, looks like the Bane of the Incomers. Interesting choice. Definitely you don't want to let them just sit up here, so some pressure needs to be put on them. I can understand why Alexander would want to do that. That being said, it's not the most efficient use of their very limited ammunition. The Bane of the Incomers, let's see if we get that split. We certainly do. We're going to take it on the chin there a little bit. I think one or two of them might fall. Nope, looks like they're going to get right back up And they're going to have to be committed here to prevent this Haladin line from falling apart. Haladin managing to smash their way through the center a little bit. Looks like Alexander's force pathing, trying to stop the Bane of the Incomers from potentially slaughtering his ally, Tundra's Fox. And the Avari, it's really swung quite a number of times here. Looks like Shore Riders of Mithrim have been brought over to back up their allies, so that's probably going to be the third unit. I think the Rigswear and the Ulfadin have taken some pretty serious losses here in battle against the Thorned Ancients, mostly due to the Avari missile support. Limited though it may be, definitely makes a difference as Ulfadin getting charged in the rear by those axe-armed cavalrymen, and many of those rabid berserkers are going to die. That being said, they are driven into a frenzied bloodlust before battle, so they will not break under any circumstances. But yeah, a very valuable unit here that was winning its way through the Avari lines that has now been effectively silenced. And it looks like the Avari are going to be able to hold on to their flank now with a little bit of help from their ally. The Shades here doing well enough. Swear to Brother facing down the barrel of quite a lot of very angry tree women, and they are going to be not long for this world over here. The Rigswear Brethil very low on numbers, and this Haladin army is kind of in tatters in a lot of different ways. That being said, Tundra's Fox still has an ace in the hole, a whole-ass company of Ulfadin, and that can be all the difference. Meanwhile, up here, looks like there's a little bit of a cavalry battle between some Gloom Hunters of the Trackless Dark. Now, they're armor-piercing two-handed spearmen, essentially, with a little bit of extra damage, best used against large targets like monsters or cavalry. But yeah, it's definitely takes a toll. You can see the Gloom Hunters here have managed to cut their way through most of that cavalry unit, but they took well over half of their unit in losses as well. 41 of those horsemen still remain, but it looks like they got a chunk of the second one and probably killed off at least one unit. So a fairly decent trade. First Refusers also on the field today. Poison Slingers. Let's see how well they can do here. Oh yeah. You can see that poison damage. The little clouds that's going to create will let you know that you are, of course, being targeted with this. That being said, the fear effect that it produces is going to be essentially useless against the Rigwear, who will fight to the end, much like Ulfadin. But things kind of hanging in the balance here. Looks like they Haladin are managing to win through in a few places, but in other places they're really starting to struggle. That being said, the center is now swung once again in favor of the Haladin. It looks like we've got some of the Rangers of the Hidden Path being activated here as well. Very scary looking, almost Wendigo-like, as many of the Avari march into battle wearing primal masks, which denote their station and their role within the Avaran society. Rangers here looking very scary. You can see their poison javelins lining up, getting ready to deliver some close-ranged death to the enemies of the wild elves. Meanwhile, over here it looks like so the Shore Riders of Mithrim kind of got caught out a little bit here. Mithrim's not having the greatest time in the backlines with their cavalry. However, it's worth noting that there's still a good amount of Mardrot here, and they're going to be activated. So we'll come back to them in just a moment. However, though, Mithrim was able to kind of butcher their way through the front lines, and Alexander is actually in a lot of trouble here. Oh yeah, especially with that catapult about. Looks like it managed to fry a number of the ladies, chunking through their HP instantly and killing them. Some of these units may recover, but there's not a ton of Haladin that we can see here. Warder of Brethil, of course there's the cavalry and stuff like that over here, but they're actually having to be brought out early, and Mevin still has some significant manpower reserve. Seeing this, he's going to start to move in. He's going to chase with some of the sword bearers, and I think he's also going to use the rest of them to begin to pressure the rest of the Haladin army and potentially catch them in a beautiful and disastrous, at least for the Haladin, pincer movement. Yeah, the Haladin front line being absolutely overrun here. Ooh, just narrowly soaring over the heads of his own infantry, frying one of his poor guildsmen. There's a big, juicy target here for that catapult, though. We'll come back and we'll see what they managed to get done. Outlaws, not sure what they're doing right now. Got at least one other unit, I think, of the Bane of the Incomers. They're going to start to take point. This is an excellent blob for them to shred their way through, and if put in the right position, they will do just that. That being said, cavalry here, Mardrot, they have something to say about it, but they're in a bit of a bind. Sword Bearers of Mithrim are in behind them. There's some Shore Riders over here as well, looking like a full unit of. And these Mardrot are facing total annihilation here. I can understand why Alexander needed to move them. Oh, that was so nasty. Definitely killed, I think, a number of the hewing guildsmen, but he hit quite a lot of the Haladin there as well. One of these Mardrot might take some serious casualties. The other one, I think, is going to get off more or less scot-free, tossing their javelins in defiance as they flee the scene of the crime. Those Mardrot from Alexander Tenki are going to need to be pulled out unless they want to face an encirclement on 3 sides. They will rout very quickly. They're already down to wavering. They may not be long for this world if he is not able to pull them out of there. Hopefully he's able to do so. Meanwhile, over here, Mithrim has managed to break through. Haladin are rebuffing them in places. The human guildsmen here being surrounded. Oh, another brutal catapult shot from the top of that hill. Shore Riders of Mithrim maneuvering themselves into a great position here. If they quickly snap a charge in, they will do some serious damage to all of these units here. So hopefully Mevin sees that opportunity. Oh, turning around. Yep, looks like he's going for that beautiful rear charge, but unfortunately, allowed a lot of his momentum to disappear, so I don't think they're going to get the charge. No, indeed. Not as devastating as it could have potentially been. Mardrot, looks like Alexander's Mardrot have managed to escape from that potential ruin. Now they are back here. A unit of Warda is basically all that stands between the Haladin army and a very serious encirclement. So we're going to come back here in just a few minutes. One more glorious catapult shot. Oh, frying so many of the ladies, making the sacrifice of these human guildsmen absolutely worth it. Skaldmare of Halath down to half strength. Look how devastating that was. Oh, that was just disgusting. Probably the worst losses that unit has suffered this entire match. Over here, though, the Rangers of the Hidden Path, they have disgorged their volleys of javelins, dealing what damage that they could. I think they managed to kill a decent amount of the Skaldmare of Halath and weaken the rest of the ladies. But I think the Avari of Captain Gervais here are kind of on their last leg. Shades of the Guarded Path over here, being overwhelmed by Ulfedin and Huskarlar. Looks like the remainder of Tundra's Fox's cavalry kind of getting in behind there, and the First Refuser is about to be committed to combat. They're not the worst to pair against Ulfedin because of their extremely high melee defense. However, when there's only 45 of them and they're about to suffer a huge charge here from those raving berserkers. Yep, they're going to take that on the chin there. And some of the Ulfedin will go down, but the First Refusers are soon to follow for sure. That being said, I believe they are locked morale. Absolutely unbreakable. And they are going to have to be killed. The last elf, the Ulfedin of Ethelbrander, will certainly take damage in the doing. Over here, I think with this, it's fair to say that this has definitely gone in favor of the Haladin. There is a small pocket of Avaran resistance over here. A very small number of Rangers of the Hidden Path, and it looks like some Maulstalkers managed to rebuff a good amount of cavalry and infantry, but there's just not enough of them left here. And I think Rex Gervais is just going to go for glory, try and kill off as many of the Haladin as he possibly can, just keep himself fighting for as long as it takes to give his ally up on the hill a chance. And a chance he is definitely got. Many of these rigs were in full retreat on the Haladin lines here. They're trying to put up a little bit of a fight, but things are very, very thin on the ground. Some of the Sweater Brother came back from routing earlier, but this is just a lot of pressure, and he is well poised to break through here. So we're going to go ahead and kick things into full speed. Shore Riders of Mithrim circumventing this brouhaha and charging into the rear of these units. Another brutal catapult volley. Not as bad as it could have been. And those Outlaws of Hithlum there are getting focus fired from quite a lot of rigs, and I don't think they're going to be very long for this world. Oh no, indeed. Some pretty gross casualties being suffered there. Mardrot of Malduin bugging out of that fight. I wouldn't want to stay in there very long against those two-handed spearmen either, but it looks like they managed to do a pretty decent amount of damage. Let's see if Alexander's going to be able to get some value off of this. One of the things you can do when being charged down is just keep that unit moving, and then eventually the charge will sort of run out of steam. If you look at this here, a lot of these cavalrymen getting clipped by those two-handed spears. Again, not something you want to play around with. Two-handed spears, two-handed polearms in general can be very, very deadly against cavalry. And a unit like the Outlaws of Hithlum against mounted foes can punch way, way, way above their weight class. hewing guildsman here managing to get a nice charge off into the Mardrot. That armor-piercing charge is going to bear fruit here, and a number of those horsemen will fall. That is a lot of attrition here, and it looks like Alexander's trying to retreat by pathing his way through there. I don't think that that was intended to be a mistake. They will turn around, but a lot of those cavalry will fall in the process, and they may just get pinned here between two units of hewing guildsmen of Androth. Let's see if we can get one glorious charge here. Nope, maybe not. A few more of them will fall. Bane of the incomers hacking their way through the rigs where they're going to suffer a devastating charge from behind. I think that's going to be the last we see of this unit here, as it is almost completely annihilated. A pretty well-timed and well-placed volley coming in from Rex Gervais's Mosstalkers. Going to kill a few of those Haladin cavalry, but like I said, cavalry not super strong in this, but it can be used to some really serious effect, and we're seeing that right now. These cavalry are just everywhere, causing disruption, and it's just an absolute nightmare. More Mardrot coming in from Tundra's Fox, but they are going to get charged down by a unit of proper dedicated melee cavalry. So we have a lot of tunnel runners here as well. These are shock infantry, armor-piercing charges, very, very scary potentially, and there's just so much of the Mithram infantry, and they have just broken any sort of serious Haladin resistance. That, I think, was Rex Gervais's general, so that's going to be all she wrote for him. Mosstalkers fighting alongside of the hewing guildsmen here against, I think there's some Skaldmare and some very tired Swear to Brothers. So they're going to be able to hold that line for a while, although not if they get charged in the rear by Alexander's Mardrot. Those hewing guildsmen are basically done like dinner. Mosstalker's going to hold out for as long as they can. Looks like the Mithram units are engaging the Haladin now on pretty equal ground. They've both got infantry support, and the Mithram cavalry in this case is definitely superior in a straight grind. The Haladin of Alexander have basically been done away with. Some of the Mardrot managing to get one cheeky charge off here, killing a number of the Guildsmen of Androth. Being spear units, they have pretty good melee defense, not a lot of killing power versus infantry in a straight up slog, but they are able to withstand damage, which for a hit and run cavalry unit like this is obviously very, very important. And I think another one of them just fell there, so slowly but surely resistance is being broken. The Haladin, that being said, have overrun the hill. Nice charge in the rear there against the sword bearers of Mithram, I think is going to be enough to rout them. Probably they won't be able to turn around and fight, at least for very long, against these cavalrymen. I'm pretty sure, indeed, the ladies are now doubling back, and they're going to get into the rear of those swordsmen. But it's chaos down here. Well-tried Dragoons have been activated, and they're cutting their way through a number of the sword bearers of Mithram again. Melee defense very low on Mithram, which can make them extremely vulnerable to cavalry charges. And Mevin is maybe a little bit all over the place. He's kind of strung himself out in a few places, so he's certainly in danger of being picked apart and defeated in detail. So something he definitely wants to try and avoid. Tunnel Runners here with their speed boost, they should be able to catch up to the Waltriders if Alexander doesn't pay enough attention, and that would be very ugly indeed. The rest of the Dragoons now doubling back, getting out of there if they can. And if you look here, things aren't great. There's about a 9% or so difference, but the cavalry is still active. Alexander 10Q making great use of his cav. They are going to suffer a pretty ugly charge here from those tunnel runners. I think 3 of them are going to die off in very short order. Now there's not a ton of Mardrot left, not maybe 10 or so, but potentially not enough to really make a difference against all of this infantry. Sweater Brother from Tundra's Fox have now run out of steam, and the Haladin are down to their cav, which, to be fair, are some of their best units and some of the hardest for the remaining Mithram forces to counter. A nice rear charge here from those Mardrot, gonna bear fruit and turn a losing fight for the Ulfadin into a winning one, into a decisive victory here. Nice little charge from the rear from the Mithram cavalry. They will, I think, kill off 1 or 2 of the berserkers. Not nearly enough of them, though, to really make a difference. And I think the fear from these Ulfadin... Oh, no, they don't have it anymore. But I think they might be able to rout these guys off in fairly short order. It's amazing that they still have this much cavalry still on the field. Still 15 Mardrot from Tundra's Fox, plus an extra 2 here. No, they might all be from the same unit. What do you know? So about 15 or so, a Mardrot, bearing down these sword bearers, and I think we know what the result is going to be. Yep, they're going to shatter those sword bearers, at least the ones that are able to flee, and that's going to be all she wrote for them up here. What remains of the Haladin has been destroyed, and there's quite a lot of Mithrim elves still swarming this hill, but it's worth noting that that Mevin is just running his forces around. Now, it's not something I think that really people think about because there's no direct explanation that sort of quantifies the amount of penalties that you get from being tired, but they are substantial. You get penalties to your morale, you get penalties to your melee defense, all kinds of things, and it can really swing a winning fight into a losing one. It looks like there goes somebody's Haladin general. It's hard to tell whose. Probably Alexander's, I would guess. These Welsh-Rider Dragoons are just kind of charging in and out. There's not really any spearmen. Mithrim have some very fine spearmen indeed. But the Mithrim elves are kind of just relying on numbers and massed charges to try and deal with these cavalry. But they're sort of surrounded here on this hilltop and not able to put up any effective resistance. Now, I think there might be some shore riders still kicking around. There goes somebody's general, probably Mevin's, and this is where it can get really bad, because most of his units are winded and tired, and indeed, you're starting to see the effects of that. We saw some units down to Shaken, even though they definitely handily win these fights. These Mardrot from Thunder's Fox here on the verge of cracking, but they're going to be able to get out of there just at the right moment. Ulfedin charging in, pinning down this whole blob, and gets deceptively in favor, I think, of the Haladin, especially because of how spread out he is. If Mevin was able to just keep everything together, he might be able to just charge things down and just sort of wear his enemies down by weight of numbers, but he is getting picked to pieces right now. You can see his forces kind of splitting up and trying to chase a lot of this cavalry, and he's just not able to get his hands on them fast. Though the Mithrim elves, especially the tunnel runners, may be. All these things in loose formation makes it difficult to have any sort of have your units be responsive, especially with all of the terrain and stuff all around here, and because of how spread out they are, they're just not able to form any sort of effective resistance. That being said, look at this here. 6% difference, definitely in favor of the red team. Let's go ahead and kick things into full speed here. Starting to see some of these units begin to spread out. Looks like Alexander is pretty comfortable to take that charge. Nope, he's going to turn around in the last moment because that would have gone very poorly. His cavalry would have naturally done some damage to these light infantry, but oh, now we turned around, but we forgot one of our units. You can see the damage there being done even by just a small unit of those tunnel runners. This is one of the things you need to watch out for with your cavalry. One of the many pitfalls that can claim the lives of your valuable horsemen. Just a small number of tunnel runners there were able to deal some pretty significant damage. I think 10 or so models dying off in very short order. That being said, Mevin is way too spread out. Might manage to finally corner a unit of these Mardrot here, slowly killing them off model by model. 2 Mardrots still left. They're going to be able to charge right into the heart of that army, but I don't think he's going to get them back. In fact, I would be very surprised if he did. No, they're both going to go down in very short order. Welsh-Rider Dragoons have now rejoined the Mardrot on the other side from Thunder's Fox. Nice charge here. Thunder's Fox is going to go in first, and that's going to open things up for the Welsh-Riders to get in there and really mix things up. A charge from the rear might be enough, and indeed it is, to rout these tired and leaderless Elves of Mithrim, and the tunnel runners are just not going to be quick enough to get there, and it's really down to the tunnel runners now. Yeah, many of the sword bearers running for the hills. Would have been nice to have everybody together, but unfortunately the cavalry are going to be able to outmaneuver the Mithrim Elves here time and time again. I think that other unit of tunnel runners is going to break. Indeed they will. Yeah, I think I just saw them running. Off they go. Now the cavalry is... Oh, there goes the Haladin General too. I think that's Alexander's Haladin General, or probably Thunder's Fox's. Oh god, it's hard to say. I don't even know. But somebody's general just died. But I don't think that there's enough of the Mithrim Elves left. Look at this. That final little clash there routed off a number of the remaining units, and this small unit of cavalry is going to make sure that they don't come back. And this is going to go to the Haladin, believe it or not. There was definitely some big mistakes here made by the Mithrin player. Not a lot of cohesion, not a lot of order, just sort of blob attack clicking all around, and ultimately he ended up losing his general, using a lot of his fatigue up because he was running everywhere, and this is the kind of thing that can happen. Still a very close game, a 1% difference there, maybe 22 or so Haladin remaining. Very, very fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you next time, but first we're going to take a look here and see what did what for the Haladin armies. Luckily, they're both the same faction, so we're going to get to see the casualties from both of the purple team players. It's going to be Alexander's army. Skaldmare of Halath did okay, but the dismounted Welsh Riders got wrecked. But oh man, look at the damage from that cavalry there. That's far and away the best of the Haladin army, especially in this case. I think even... No, he didn't have any Berserkers. He just had the Shield Maidens. But everything else just got swamped by the Mithrin Elves. They just absolutely dominated the infantry fight for 90% of that game, but there was just no cavalry support left for the end, and they ended up getting picked apart. Over here we have Tundra's Fox's army. The Skaldmare did super well. Ulfodin did really well. A lot of his infantry was able to kind of mix it up with the Avari, and it just became a grind fight. And they, oh man, look at that. That's the most I've ever seen on any Huskarlar Thargelion unit in the entirety of Silmarillion since the Haladin were added. Nearly 300 kills on the Huskarlar. They just ground up chaff like it was their job, and in fact it is. And much of the Avari roster is in fact made up of mid-tier units, so definitely fits the bill for chaff in a lot of cases. And his whole army just killed things to death. A few of the Huskarlar got targeted down early on, but there was enough of them in numbers that they were able to kind of pick up the slack from the rest of the units. And of course, his cavalry did extremely well in addition, although one of them was cut down before they could achieve any sort of great numbers of kills. In any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.